Hello. Welcome to Let's Draw Goths Live. Everybody hear me okay? Am I doing all right so far? Thoughts? Feelings? Anything? Okay. So, what I'm going to do today is I've zoomed out on my digital drawing app, Clip Studio Paint, so that you can see what I'm doing a little more this time. And that's for anybody who's interested in drawing and painting digitally. Also, I'm going to be drawing some Goths, as the name implies. I'm also going to be talking about a subject that is going to be a constant in any artist's life. In this context, it's about drawing and painting, but I think it could go toward music or athleticism. I don't even know. Everything. If you've got a creative pursuit, you're going to need to think about exploration and commitment. So that's what I'm going to be dribbling on about. What's the word? I think I'm going to actually change this real quick. I don't want to be... Yeah, that's better. Okay, so let's see here. Our first Goth for today goes by Biggie Bag with a 3 as the E on Instagram. You know, you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes what you had in mind when you first get on Instagram has already been taken. So you got to throw in an E. That's a 3 is what I mean. Okay. Biggie Bag with a 3 as an E. Here we go. All right, that works. Okay, so exploration and commitment. First, I just got to make sure that my brush is a good size for me. It's a little big for what I'm going to be showing you. Let's do it more like an 8. Okay. So when you're an artist, you're going to have to get used to the concepts of exploring and committing. And I would say that committing is more important, but how are you supposed to know what to commit to if you haven't explored first, right? And I sort of think of it like dating and relationships and marriage. Everybody, has their own goals and ethics and whatever when they're, dating and looking for somebody. But generally, people are they go out and they date and they hang out with people and they experiment and all of it, because you're not sure what you're looking for. You got an idea of what you want, but is that even right or not? You don't know. So you just got to go out and figure it out as you go. And then hopefully things won't work out and won't work out and won't work out with people until it does work with somebody, right? That's what we're all kind of shooting for every time we experiment with that next person. Let's see, what was I drawing with? Right. And so that, and then once you decide, okay, this is the one I'm gonna bank on, bet on, then you commit to that person. And it's like that with drawing and painting. The end goal is to commit to something. And I think that's where I went wrong a lot in my youth, and we can get into stories a little later. But is anybody there? Can you say hi if you're watching? Because I think when you're a beginner artist, drawing, etc., it's really hard to commit. It's even hard to explore, I think. But when you see people's finished artwork when they're beginners, it looks like they really never quite got around to committing to a lot of things. And I'll show you what I mean. Like what I'm doing right now, as I sketch and talk, I've got this layer turned down to 30% because I wasn't sure if this was going to be even like a direct drawing or an underdrawing. So I'm going to call it an underdrawing, and I've got it turned down. And so it is kind of scratchy and hairy, and there's a lot of feeling around because I'm still deciding what is going to work best as I draw. And that's okay. That's the exploration part of the process. As a matter of fact, I did the same silly move that I do every time, which is draw too big. That's okay. You can draw too big, draw too small, whatever feels comfortable when you're drawing, especially digitally, and then just change it when you're ready. Okay. And then I think I'm going to have to shrink this pen. Okay. By the way, this is Clip Studio. I haven't really talked about it much on this channel, even though it really is sort of the workhorse for my illustration business, and it's how I was able to create the whole Let's Draw Goths coloring book. It was all done on my iPad Pro with Clip Studio. I think my version is EX. It just says Clip Studio Paint, but I think my version is EX. Don't be looking at my info though. And so I subscribed to that when I first got this. Well, when I first got this iPad, I got what is it called? Sounds almost kind of dirty. What is that? Procreate. You know what I'm talking about. Because everybody was like, you got to draw in Procreate. And I like it for stuff. I've gotten used to it. But when I first got this iPad, it felt weird being in that program. It just didn't draw the way I expected it to, especially like when penciling. So my thing on the iMac was always, for the last few years, Clip Studio. And so when they made their version available for mobile devices, I grabbed that, and it is a full version of Clip Studio that you can use on the mobile devices. And anyway, the reason I went ahead and subscribed to the most expensive version is it's got all the like page handling stuff, which I was intimidated by at first. I think it's very kind of not easy to get around on with the settings and everything, but I checked out some tutorials on here on YouTube, and I was able to figure out how to like set up, you know, a multi-page document in here. And I haven't looked back. It's just an amazing way to keep track of your entire book as you draw each page. So that's why I want to show you a little bit more of what I'm doing with this app. But the point of the chat today is exploration and commitment. Like with the sexy time. Okay, so I've been chatting and exploring with this drawing for way too long, and I'm going to go ahead and start committing. And the reason I wanted to start with this sort of scratchy underdrawing is, like I said, it's what, you know, a lot of beginners get hung up in. You know, before I commit, I really like the big bagginess of her sweater and the oversizedness of it, and I didn't really capture that in the sketch. Anyway, when I was young, I relate because when I was young, you know, I thought everything I did was gold, even though I really hadn't been like trained by anybody. I hadn't gone to art school until I was like 28. I started art school. And oh, what's up, Duct Tape? What's going on? Good to see you again. Uh-oh, don't crash. Let me get my thoughts together while this tries to not crash. Okay, I'll save that. So, what was my point? Oh, I had this book when I was like 13, and I was obsessed with drawing Marvel superheroes. Did I save that? Okay. I was obsessed with drawing Wolverine and Spider-Man and everything, so I bought this book called the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And, you know, kind of used it as my Bible for figuring out how to draw. I was like, yes, I want to draw like Marvel, so this is the book. And, well, we'll get into the problems with what happened with that book later, but one of the things that was in this book was, what am I trying to do here? Okay. One of the things that was in the book was like different ways of doing your penciling and exploring. And they were like, you know, check this out and see what works best for you. Everybody works differently. And one of the ways that really resonated with me that they showed was, I think it was like a drawing of Thor, and it's in pencil, and it's all scratchy like this, but maybe worse. You know, there's a lot of just like stuff all over. And I was like, yeah, that's me. I'm like kind of messy and feeling pretty non-committal. And so I really like took that on as my way of penciling. And it also reminded me of this comic that I had seen around the same time, The Family Circus. I still remember so clearly. There was this one family circus where one of the kids, Billy or whatever, gave his mom a drawing. Yeah, I think this works. I might move her head a little bit. He gives her a drawing, and it's like all scratchy and pencily, and it's just completely abstract, right? And she's like, I love it. The mom is so supportive and loving about it. And then in the comic, it's revealed that like she sees that there's this like angel or something perfectly drawn within the linty mess of all these scratches. It's hiding in there, but it is there. So I think I don't know if I got these concepts mixed up or what, but I kind of made this homogenized idea that was a version of both concepts there, and I started thinking that I'll just draw these super hairy underdrawings and I'll get my job at Marvel, and then these hairy drawings will get passed on to the inker, and the inker will figure out where the angel is in there, but it's not my problem anymore. So I took these ideas and these drawings to some comic book conventions. And got my ass handed to me by editors from DC and Marvel and Dark Horse and everybody else you could think of. Just coming in being like, oh, I'm awesome. Check out my awesome drawings. You know, when your only feedback has like been from your mom and a couple friends at school or whatever, you're a good drawer. You know, you really can end up with an unrealistic self-criticism or outlook or whatever you want to call it. All right, that's more than enough exploration and hairiness. All right, so I'm going to lock this with this lock button up here on the layers, and that way it don't accidentally draw on there. And what I like to do, and why I love Clip Studio, is I change this layer property expression color to monochrome. And that makes it so every pixel that I draw is either going to be black or white, nothing in between. I'll show you what I mean. All right, so I think I still like this pen, but I'm going to make it bigger. All right, so where was I? I was going around with this portfolio that had all these hairy drawings in it, and the editors were like, you know, this isn't good enough. You got to decide and show the inker where they're supposed to put the line. And I feel like, oh, they were being like kind of mean about it. Who knows? I don't know. I also felt this like resentment because I was like driving home like I remember from Let's Draw Goths the Marvel way that you're supposed that it's an acceptable way to do it. And then I really held on to that idea that, oh, Marvel told me to do it this way, and then they shamed me for drawing that way at conventions. Well, the punchline of this story is that kind of had some learning disabilities growing up and wasn't an amazing reader. And it turned out that I just kind of didn't absorb everything that was in that book, fully, including this concept. I didn't really fully read the whole thing. Maybe I got started and then I didn't finish. Oh, yeah, I get it. And I didn't finish reading the rest of it, which was sketch around in pencil and explore, and then commit. Even if you're the penciler, you still have to commit to show the inker where they should drop that final line, approximately. They should have like 90% idea of what you mean by your sketch, and not have to like find the angel in there somewhere. That's not their job, to clean up your mess. Not to say you can't have sort of a messy, sketchy style, but if everything is blurry or fuzzy looking everywhere, it's generally going to look amateurish. You might need to at least kind of tighten up in the face or the focal point where people should be looking. Should be clearer, even if you get blurry or sketchy everywhere else. Does that make sense? And so that's what I'm trying to do with this here. But also, I think that the lesson that I want to get out there is, even though, pros like myself, even though we draw digitally, there's a lot of great tools, there are time-saving devices. I think you really still have to come at it from that, having that experience of knowing how to commit, because you still have to commit digitally. And the problem with drawing digitally is it's kind of all set up to let you never commit. You can be sort of be a confirmed bachelor of digital drawing if you want to be, and just never finish anything really. And then you put it up on Reddit or Instagram or whatever, and you're like, look at my finished painting, but it doesn't look finished. It looks blurry or like you didn't commit. Oh, you know what? She needs a skirt under this sweater. I finally figured out that if I have my earbuds in, I can rock out to the synth wave whatever with you guys. Okay, here we go. Here's a thought. Even when you are drawing digitally, why not, leave some overlaps and gaps and stuff in order to still have an inky on paper look? Why not? I wouldn't do it everywhere, but have you ever seen Peppa Pig? Peppa Pig, check out how they draw on Peppa Pig. It's purposefully, obviously flat. You'll notice first where people have, or characters have, two eyes on the same side of their head, which is really just more exaggerated perspective on an animal. But also everything's kind of overlapping, and it's like the finished drawing. It's the finished cartoon up on YouTube Kids or wherever, I don't know. It's finished, but it's purposefully a little askew with its the way things line up with their drawing. It's a little advanced to do it on purpose, I admit. Just an idea. That looks like she's got some kind of knee problem, though. The other thing that I love about Clip Studio is you get this sort of mini palette of colors to work from. Like Photoshop would have foreground color, background color, and then you would like hit X or whatever to switch back and forth, or change the foreground color. With this one, you have foreground, I guess you could call that a second color, which you can just click on to use the second color, which here would be white, which is different than my background image. But then the third one is transparency. So rather than choosing the eraser, and it's a different tool with different sizes and tips and all that, you still use your same tool. The pen tool is what I'm using, but now I'm drawing with transparency, and I find that it have more control. You know what to expect when you're drawing. and you can kind of have more of a unified look. What's going on, Michael? Thanks for joining. If you're just tuning in, I'm trying to commit to a drawing of Biggie Bag with a 3 as an E on Instagram. And I'm talking about commitment and exploration while drawing. And how it's tempting to never commit when you are drawing digitally. And if you've never seen Michael Slack's work, check that out, because he's a master, right, at drawing, painting digitally, especially in a way where it doesn't look digital, it doesn't look computery. I think that's sort of your forte, right? I wanted to show why I use this layer type, the monochrome. If you zoom in on it, you see that the artwork is black pixels. You could also put white pixels down, or like I said, you could use transparency, which works better for what I'm doing. And I found that for one, makes a more unifying look when you're doing stuff, at least for print. I wouldn't do it for like online only kind of display resolution, low res stuff. But for print, you're never going to see the jaggedness that's there with these stair steps. You're never going to be able to like zoom in with your eye enough to be able to notice that that's really what it looks like. So it gets rid of all that fuzziness that you usually get with a normal layer. Like here, let's see here. There's a difference. That's the same brush on a color layer. It's all got the fuzzy edges. And that's supposed to make it look less computery. But it just comes with a lot of problems. And all of which I will go into right now. No, because I'm kind of out of thoughts on commitment, and that was kind of my main point. If anybody wants to add or has any thoughts or questions. But you know, with the coloring book, and then with any digital art in general, when you have these lines that are perfectly crisp like this, it makes it super easy to drop in color, and there's never going to be any weird anomalies and fuzziness that can happen when you're making selections and coloring things in, and then you change your mind and then you adjust something. You end up with all this gunk around your colors and your lines. So I found that if you just do it this way, that doesn't happen. All right. Oh, I was looking for a tool that isn't in this app. So I'm just going to cross-hatch real quick with this, and then she'll be almost done. Well, I hope that someday I can start these lives exactly on time. Turns out there's a lot of setup and whatever involved. And trying to build a studio in the back, turn my garage into a studio for this, so I can just leave all the cameras and etc. up. That'll be cool. And it is hard to get like a contractor type person to call you back, though. That hasn't happened for me. So what's new in the world of goth news? Anything new out there going on in the goth universe? Have you heard about the Me Tooing of Marilyn Manson? That's a shame. You know, I got to talking to my wife about it, and I was like, maybe I should sort of put an asterisk on my philosophy that the Goths are the colorful salamanders and, frogs that aren't really poisonous, but they're very colorful as a warning to predators, even though they're actually harmless. Just, as a defense. And I think, she said some things that I agree with, and that's it does kind of need, I think it does need an asterisk, because in general, I think that's true, but maybe it's not fair to generalize about anybody. Maybe everybody gets into a subculture for their own reason, or a field. But the asterisk is, don't automatically trust anybody just because they are a rock star or a comedian or in Jello commercials or a politician or a priest or whatever. You can't automatically say, well, you get a free pass and I'm going to let my guard down because blah is, what I know about you. And that's a big old generality just because of their job or whatever. Right? All right, I got to finish her up. Last comment from Michael is yep, and I think that's just him agreeing with everything that I've said so far. I used to think that, way too long into my adulthood, that I was one of the good ones, and women, girls shouldn't be nervous around me. I've been checked off as one of the good ones, and it's just an understanding. It's understood out there. Don't worry about this guy. And I feel like in recent years, in especially in this Me Too movement, that you're never going to have that check off. I mean, I understand if you're married and even still husbands get violent, but obviously my wife trusts me to not hurt her or anything. But in general, being left alone in a room with as a guy with a woman, there is no oh, he's checked off, he's safe. A woman can't afford to have that assumption about anybody, and that's a shame. It's you're either somebody who has hurt women or could. That's about as best as a woman can ever assume about you. That sucks. Men don't have to think about that. That's all I have to say about that. When I originally came up with the thought, the theme for this episode, it was going to just be about commitment, because that's what you notice with beginners art, is that there's an amount of commitment that is not happening when they're laying down their strokes, whatever. And art is all about committing. You got to like decide what it is that you want it to look like, and then do your best to make it look like that. But there really is also, there has to be the stage of the exploring, and there's a million ways to explore, and you don't have to like show anybody that stuff, and you don't have to show anybody your finished artwork until you've decided that it's finished and you want to show it to people. So it's important to remember the exploring, and that there's not any one way to do that. Like, you know, I did this underdrawing with lines, but as I was kind of filling out her shoes, I kind of just almost color in as I go and just sort of make a mass, a lump, until I like the lump. How do you like my lump? All right. And now I've dragged my feet way too long, and I'm going to draw her face. I set aside a lot of pictures that I respond to. I'm, you know, fairly picky with what I want to draw, even for these. But you know, I set aside a pretty good amount of stuff that I'd like to get to. And I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna bust through them and get as many done as possible. And it just doesn't seem to happen as fast as I would like, but what are you gonna do? Okay. So whatever goes on with my reference while I'm drawing, I might rely on a lot of reference, like for the body, making sure the proportions are okay. But there's something that I've figured out about faces, which is I like to not really look at the picture too much once it's time to draw the face. And that's not because I don't care what they look like, it's just that I've kind of done it a different way, and it's something that I've been working on over the last few years as I draw likenesses. And that is to kind of take in the drawing, take in the image of the person, take in like everything about how they look, and then let that kind of sink in and not look at their face too much from there. Because I found that if you look at the face too much, you end up kind of just trying to copy a photo and become kind of some kind of photocopy machine instead of I'd rather draw how somebody feels, you know what I mean? Like how your brain might remember that person. And that would be their face, but it also maybe be how they made you feel, you know, if you know them, if you had some interaction with the person, how did that person make you feel? It's gonna kind of, I think, influence the way you draw that person. And if you don't believe me, Google image search illustrations of Donald Trump, you know. There's gonna be a lot of drawings of people who are disgusted by him. There's going to be some drawings that are maybe making him idealized in some way. And I think that happens with everybody that you draw on some level. All right, I think that this is working out okay. She's got kind of sleepy eyes, which is kind of cool. thing I've said earlier, though, the more lines you add, the older somebody's going to look. And so you got to be careful to, keep somebody looking. You can look young and tired without looking like a completely haggard person. Or just like natural Ringo sad eyes, Oh, yeah. Michael says it's important to not get caught up in is it good while exploring. And that is something that has really tripped me up a lot. And I think just really more recently in the last year or so, I've been able to, with the help of counseling and medication and stuff, mostly maybe medication, not worry so much about that. That inner monologue of like, oh, this sucks when you just got started. It'll just kill you and your drawing. And I mean, first of all, you don't know if it sucks till you're really done and it's finished. And even then, a lot of times I'll like set something aside, and then after a few hours or a few days, look at it again, and it's either grown on me or not as cool as I thought it was at the moment. You know what I mean? You could go either way. But even so, if it's not as good as you wanted it to be or what you pictured in your mind, it's still you still gotta like judge, is it worth using this or showing it? Should I really like start over rather than sending it to a client? That's a whole different issue than if it's like as good as you wanted it to be within your own mind. And most of the time, if it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be and I show it to a client, they don't know what you had in your mind, so it doesn't matter. They still love it. And then if they don't love it, they can tell you what they don't love about it, and you can fix that, and it might not even be the thing that was bothering you. Might be a whole other issue. Have you ever put a red herring in your illustration contract work for a client? I don't know if it's super ethical, and I generally don't, but if you have a client where you know that you get to know them and you know that they're gonna need to come up with something to tell you to fix, it's sort of that art director syndrome. They gotta bring up something for you to fix. If you know that going in, then give them something. Give them something that is obvious that needs to be fixed. And it's a gamble because you can't like make it so stupid that they're like, are you messing with me? Are you Borat? What is going on with this? But if you kind of, in your decision making, throw in something that is a little off and a little obvious, hey, now they have something that they can tell you to fix. And you fix that, and it's easy because you saw it coming. Just an idea. There was a guy that I worked with that would do that every time. I don't know if I learned this move from this guy or what, but as in-house graphic designers, before I even went to art school, I was working at this learning software company, and there was this guy that would, all right, this guy's Biggie Bags is definitely done, right? This guy would do that, and the art director was a friend, and he pointed it out. Like, you see weird stuff in his animations or whatever, it's on purpose, because he might be having trouble with other stuff, I think he was not as skilled as others, and maybe he was struggling. So rather than get it all together, he would throw in this weird stuff. and hope that you would just complain about that. And one of them was, yeah, he had to do this. He had to do this animation about like a character was stuffing a bunch of weird stuff into a travel bag. Speaking of bags, and it was cartoony where he was doing stuff that wouldn't work in real life. And the last thing that he stuffed into this, you know, clamshell kind of handbag was a giant 6-foot hoagie, and it just got kind of got stuffed into the lips of this purse. And the art director was like, "Come on, man, what are you doing with that? You know what you're doing." There. And then what I might do is get a screen grab of this. And then it's ready to Instagram to Biggie Bags. How nice. All right, how am I doing on time? 11:30. Now, did Jack Kirby draw with the giant hairy arm, or was he using it as criticism? So he had a pretty unconventional, loose way of working. But it all definitely got hammered out in the inking, right? Okay, so next I'm going to be drawing. Let's see, let's make sure this is saved. How are you guys feeling about the whole interface being in there? Do you like it looking more like a clean TV show, or do you like the behind the scenes interface stuff? Let me know. Okay. Arg. Okay, so next, you know, I'm probably gonna have to shave down the lineup of what I had in mind. We could actually, let's see here. We've got a mystery goth, just that I grabbed on the internet. Have no idea who he is, but it's a guy, which would be nice to mix it up, I think. I mean, isn't that the beauty? Isn't that, I mean, that's kind of one of the best things that I love about drawing goths, is it wipes out all other categories. Sex, race, age, even. It's really hard to know anything else about a person, especially from an old photo. We've also got Lindsay, who was a woman who I drew in like the second episode of this show ever, like in May. And I was able to get a hold of her, and she sent me more photos of her. That's kind of tempting. Or we've got Matt Reiser eating a taco. Any thoughts on that? All right. I'm going to make a longer playlist because this playlist is clearly only like 40 minutes long. Okay, so I'm going to try to do mystery goth person, and I'm going to go full commitment, and there still will be exploration, but I'm just going to go direct with this one. And so what happens with direct drawing, if you are not familiar, is you don't bother with an underdrawing. Which means you really kind of have to be, I don't know, 100% committal? Would you call it that? There's not really a lot of room for like fudging around. And of course this is digital, so if something really doesn't work out and I hate it, I can delete it, but I'm pretending that this is just ink. But I think it's important to work this way, at least sometimes when you're practicing, because it really exercises your commitment muscle. So a lot of times it means looking and then drawing, like I like to do. And so when you're looking, what you're looking at is trying to take in as much information about what's going on with the person and the pose and the outfit and all of it at the same time. And one of the main things to figure out there is like the angle of the head. You don't want to just, I'm going to do something wrong first here. You don't want to just assume always that somebody is, has a level head in that boring sort of way, right? What's really going on in a pose and an attitude, it's important to kind of put some better attitude than that into it. Both of Mystery Goth's eyes aren't even really visible in this photo that you're not seeing. But I think it's important to kind of, even though it's going to get covered up, kind of know anyway. I don't know. Or maybe leave a little bit in there. Why not? I got a message from a new Instagram follower this week, and they asked a good question. How do I get the photos that I work from? Specifically, I think they were asking about the coloring book. So maybe I'll get into that for a second. When I started drawing along these lines, it was when the pandemic first started, and a lot of my gigs that I usually did kind of came to a halt. So I started drawing out of yearbooks, and that was really just practice because I like to draw faces, and I love seeing like the rows of mug shots. I kind of giggle at how everybody has a different face, and just everybody's got like a different head shape, and the configuration of everybody's, I don't know, I just love looking at it. And I got obsessed with the idea of making my own yearbook. Maybe someday I will. But I started seeking out the more oddballs. And then I started seeking out oddballs in more and more yearbooks and trying to find like from the other coasts and other schools, finding them online. And it just was really hard to find the kind of people I was looking for. So I gave up on yearbooks and I started looking elsewhere. And I started getting into this video that I'm obsessed with that you can find here on YouTube called The Height of Goth, which is a sort of a documentary about this club called Club Exclusive. And that's actually where this Lindsay woman is that I'll have to get to at some point today or next time. Anyway, that was cool, but it's all like an old VHS in the dark, and it was really hard to get people to work from with that too. So then I started looking around on Instagram, and once I decided to make a book, when you're an illustrator, it can be tempting to just be like, oh, I'm gonna like just grab inspiration from wherever or reference photos and not worry about, nobody will see. What's the chances that somebody, will notice that they're in this book? Well, it's not really a fair way to do things. And honestly, I decided that I was going to do everything I could to find everybody in the photos that I was working with and make sure that it was cool with them what I was doing, because I didn't know if people would be okay with it or if they'd be shy or whatever. And it's just been an overwhelming positive response from people who I draw, that they love it and they turn it into their avatar on Instagram or whatever, and that's cool. And if somebody were to come to me and be like, somebody spying on my front yard, but I guess since they're 6 years old, it's fine. Where was I? Oh, obviously, if somebody was like, I would rather like not be in the book or not, be on one of these lives, then I won't do it. That's fine. And actually, one person that I drew for the book, I wrote them and asked, is it okay? I think I just did them for a video, and then I asked them if they wanted to be in the book, and never heard back, emailed, never heard back, which I take as a no. I'm not gonna be dense about it, so that's fine. I just changed it. I found inspiration from other photos and mixed a few things, and oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I just made up basically my own person from multiple photos, different people's hair, different person's face, and sort of the concept of what was going on in the pose was still there, but you can't copyright or trademark a concept like that, right? So I feel good about that. So this is a cape. I'm not going to draw the arm. The other thing about commitment and this coloring book actually that I had to figure out as I went along is, you look at these old photos and sometimes it's clear what's going on in the photo as far as like what they're wearing or what they're doing. Sometimes it's not that clear. So I just made a point to decide for myself what was going to be in the illustration. If it wasn't clear in the photo, I would just make it clear in the illustration. And that means, not necessarily rendering it like Da Vinci did it. It doesn't have to be amazing, but it just has to be clear what it is that's in the illustration. No amorphous blobs allowed. So like with this guy, I see that he's got ruffly sleeves. Ah, crap. Should have locked that last layer. Now I'm drawing on the wrong layer for a long time. That sucks. Oh, crap. All right, hold on. I gotta fix this here. I think what I'm gonna have to do is just sample the paper color and you know what I'll do? I'll just make a selection the size of this mess up here, and then I will move the selection down here, copy and paste. And then merge that down, and that's good enough. I just repaired that area that I drew on that I shouldn't have been, and I'll have to do a little bit of catch up, but that's okay because that didn't look very good anyway. Oh, Michael Slack was wondering about my coloring book. A new one that I'm making and releasing. Probably I'll upload it tomorrow, and then it just takes as long as it takes for Amazon to process it, and then it'll be available. I wish I could say a date, but they never seem to like let you do that. But this book is not my drawings, and I can get into why in a minute, but basically the concept is vintage horror comics as a coloring book. And you know, I've seen coloring books where am I happy with this? I guess so. I've seen coloring books where they'll have like old horror covers that you can color in, or any comic, but I've never seen a book where it's like the pages of a comic book that you can do whatever you want with. You can write your own story in the word bubbles, you can color it in. I like the interior pages more than covers. I think that there's something really, they have their own appeal. And I like the idea of like writing in your own goofy lines. I used to do that when I was a kid. Modifying stuff in the newspaper or whatever. And so that's what I did, and it's probably like 55 pages of interior horror comics from the olden pre-code days, where you could have been like hauled in by the FBI for drawing them. I'll move him a little closer here. I can't see what's going on with his hand. Okay, so the reason I did that is I think I'm coming to terms with the fact that when I do like a big project that involves drawing, illustration, whatever, it just kind of like takes a lot out of me, and it's exciting when it's, you know, finished and it's out there, but I feel like I need a break from the pressure of it. So I like to have like a lower pressure project to do after, as like a little between things thing to do. And honestly, these middle projects, I call them, you know, the low pressure middle projects, they end up taking way longer than something that isn't my own artwork or this lower priority like that should take, unfortunately. And then I'm like, why did I spend so much time on a thing that isn't even really my drawings? It's more like I'm art director on it or something, you know, or editor. So I don't know, I might try to mediate that a little bit next time. Be more careful about my middle projects that I take on. The other middle project that I did recently, I'm actually really happy that I did it. It just took way too long to pull it off. And that is Gnats in a Hat. Is a children's book that I wrote. I don't know. I was just listening to an interview with Frank Oz where they were like, we didn't make, you know, kids TV. It was just for like everybody. It was for adults, and kids could watch it too. And I feel like that's kind of how I create. I would like to do stuff that's mostly clean, and I'm sorry if any kids take it in and get traumatized, but they're not really the intended audience anyway, so I kind of have that out. But with Gnats in a Hat, I had done all these illustrations like 6 years ago, and it was like, the concept was super stupid. It was like, here's a bug or an insect, whatever, a worm, and then it's wearing Um, it's wearing something that sort of rhymes with the name of that bug, and it's such a like very limiting sort of concept. Like, how do you write after you've already done those illustrations? Now you're supposed to write something, but that's what I tried to do. I wouldn't recommend it, but it was oddly satisfying to like still somehow come up with something that was funny and made some sense, even if it was a little surreal with the premise. So I wrote it, and that took way too long to write, and I released it as a full color book for Kindle or print. And that's cool. Nobody really bought it, but I actually had the most fun turning it into an audio book. And that is all complete, and it's just waiting to get processed and uploaded to iTunes or whatever, Apple Music, whatever they call it now. And it's going to be on Audible. And I got a pro. I just made sure to pay top dollar to get the best person I could find that sounded, really like I wanted this narrator to sound. It was a pro actor who could really like get it just right. And that was a lot of fun. That was way more fun than writing or illustrating it. It was just directing somebody else to say it and have it come back and like really sound like something that I don't know. There's like, I see why people write screenplays, you know what I mean, where you write these words and you're like, yeah, this could work, I don't know, and you don't really know until like the right actor gets a hold of it and makes it shine, and then it's like this real thing. It's like the movie or the TV show, and you're like, oh damn, it worked, this is awesome. So that's how that felt. That was awesome. I would like to do that again when I can. Yeah, Michael, I'd be curious what you think too about the new coloring book, because it's all from public domain artwork that I was able to find online, and then I did some digital trickery that I don't think anybody else is doing, the way that I was able to take pretty low res stuff, relatively not print resolution, and turn it into print resolution artwork and have it be crisp and look good and everything. I'd also like to make a new Skillshare class about making coloring books, and I have it like written, and I haven't shot anything yet for it, but I'm not sure how much of that stuff I should reveal, because I think people could really use the techniques for evil if they wanted to, and they could use it to like kind of get under me with what the things I've done, and just kind of do the same thing but more of them, and kind of, I don't know, how much do you sit on knowledge that you want to use for your own purposes? Is generally I like to be pretty giving and about these sorts of things, but I don't know. Maybe it's not time to give away everything yet. I like making stupid looking little feet. That's fun for me. One reason to like really look and check out what's going on in a photo or a pose before drawing it for yourself is you can on first glance think that you're seeing something kind of like what I thought I was seeing in the Drawing the Marvel Away book, and then it turns out you're wrong, that you were seeing a shape that isn't what you thought it was at first glance. And so with this one, I thought I was looking at his back leg and his pant leg there, but actually I was looking at part of the interior of his cape. So I got to make sure I know what I'm drawing there. So you look at this. You can kind of leave it kind of rough down here with the shapes, and it kind of looks like he's standing in the carpet or even grass. Maybe I'll do that a little bit on this one too. Oops. Well, this is about all I wanted to say with this guy. Oh. It's kind of folded over. He's also doing that baller move of having a ring over a black glove. That means you got to buy the gloves probably first, and then go and seek out a ring that fits well over the glove. That's pretty cool. Or what about pinky rings? You know, like everybody in Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds has their pinky rings. I don't know if I'm that cool to be able to pull that off. Is that like a New Jersey thing? Okay, so now what I'm going to do before I give up on this guy is color him in real quick. So I think what I'm going to do is, this is another thing that I came up with for the coloring book, which is the idea of drawing the highlights in a way that people can color them in as highlights, which is something I've never seen in another coloring book before, but it was just necessary when you're drawing Goths. So they're all wearing black, so you need to be able to define the form and the clothes with highlights, and the rest is just going to drop out into black. So I came up with this way of drawing like squiggles, and then you'd be able to draw in the color. I just turned those squiggles into the color, so it's a little different than what I mean there. Does that make any sense? And I'll probably get back to that color later, but I'm going to lock the transparency on that and lock the layer. Thanks, Michael. I'm trying. Better to get stuff done than worry about making everything perfect. I've struggled with perfection. Ooh, there's another theme for another episode, because I think you really need to get into it, and it needs to be sort of titled so people know what it's about. But I would like to get into the idea of perfectionism and pain, or anguish, or whatever you want to call it. It's a very goth concept. when it comes to making your art. Because I used to equate the value of my art when I had like a client, especially, the client is paying this amount of money. I need to give them good, like more value than they would get out of a sketchbook or something. And that would, in my mind, mean like anguish and pain and like confusion, and I'd have to like lose my patience sometimes. And there was something in my mind where I thought that meant I was giving them value, like, oh, it's sort of not to offend anybody, but it's kind of a Catholic way of thinking, which is weird because I have no direct experience with Catholicism, but from what I understand, it's very like, it's that kind of concept of like you are providing value to God and to the world because you're punishing yourself, you know what I mean? So that's ridiculous, especially as far as art goes, because most of the time when somebody's like interested in art or interested in buying art or hiring you for your art, no matter what the subject matter is, it's still in the end supposed to have like an air of fun, of discovery and exploration and fun and all those keywords. And if you didn't have fun while you were drawing or painting or whatever, it shows in your art. And I recorded a video on that earlier, where I went into it briefly, which is just like this almost psychic phenomenon that happens. Let's see here. The psychic phenomenon that happens between the creator and the person taking it in, and that's, I'm going to turn the opacity down so I can see what I'm doing. Make a new layer. Where was I? The psychic thing that happens between you, the creator, and the person taking in the art. Stephen King talks about it, like this thing that happens, between your brain and their brain while he's writing and then you're reading. And the same thing happens with art. So I think if you're not having fun while you're drawing, the person taking in your art, looking at it, can kind of sense that somehow. I don't know how that, I think this is one of the mysteries of the world, right? How do they know? They just somehow, the feeling isn't there, you're not vibing correctly if you didn't have fun. And so I think I just spent way too much of my life being like, ugh, this is hard and I don't know what to do and not having fun, but I'm like getting it done. And I think that kind of really got in the way of my successes in life. What might look interesting is I'll turn this layer into a multiply layer, and that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Oh well. Oh, that's why. Okay, that's fine. This one. Now everything I do on this layer, it'll still kind of show the paper texture. Just have to make sure to not overlap stuff I already drew. That's too big. All right, I'm gonna put a button on this in a minute, and then before leaving, I wanted to do one more to help with my SEO, and that's gonna be. I was thinking about the icons of Gothic culture. Um, the sort of characters that you think of, or the people, and some of them are real people and some of them are characters, like I said. But what about Elvira? I think everybody who's interested in goth culture for the most part loves Elvira, and there's certainly going to be people who like say that they're team Vampira or something, but Mila Nurmi might have, I think, disagreed, but I think the world has room for both. It's not Cassandra Peterson's fault what happened with contracts and jobs and stuff. So I think there's room to love both. And I grew up with Elvira. I wasn't made aware of Vampira until much later. I don't think I saw like Plan 9 or anything until I was in like college age. But man, I grew up on Elvira for sure. And she was sexy, and I had like her sexy posters, and I think I even had like her 7-Eleven drink cup, t-shirts, posters. The thing that I realized fairly recently in life, though, is that she would host movies, obviously, but she hosted one movie that we rented when I was like, I don't know, 12. And I was a huge, I don't want to use anything derogatory even towards myself, but what could we say? What's another word for wuss? I can't think of one, so we'll just say I was a wuss about horror movies and getting scared. And I think that through the same self-exploration and development of late, I've realized that it might be because of anxiety. I think maybe I was dealing with anxiety back then and as a kid in different ways, but I didn't want to get triggered before the word triggered was a word by horror movies. So for the most part, I stayed away from them until I was like, an adult, I guess. I really don't think I took in any horror movies on purpose as a kid or a teenager. Anyway, monster movies and stuff, that's different. And that is kind of my yummy bread pudding in my tummy is like, I am so sorry that I said that. But no, it's the comfort food is monster movies for me. Whether they're like Japanese or British, I love UK kind of stuff. And at the time, I don't even really think I understood where these movies were coming from or who was making them. But anyway, we rented this movie when I was like 12, and all I remembered about it before the age of the internet was that Elvira hosted it. And I remember that it had everything that I have come to love about these kind of movies and the whole, I don't know, B movie, B horror, monster movies. And that is, I'll tell you what the movie is in a minute, but what I remembered was that there were these scenes, and I remembered it being Elvira interacting with these monsters, but upon more recent inspection, that's not what happened. But there were these monsters, and they were dancing around, having fun, and it was super campy and goofy. And the monsters were so like lower budget than anything else I had ever seen. To where even as a 12-year-old, I could see that they were wearing a monster mask like I could buy at the local, costume shop. Excuse me. And they were wearing the gloves that kind of came with it. And then let's see here. What do I want to do with this guy's pants? Yeah, I think I'll use this pencil actually. That looks gross. Never mind. But then these monsters were wearing turtlenecks, and as a 12-year-old, I was like, oh, they're wearing monster masks and turtlenecks, like bright red turtlenecks and white turtlenecks. And as a 12-year-old, I was like, they're wearing turtlenecks so that you don't have to have the whole costume, right? You could see the low budgetness even as a kid. Like, I know why you're doing that. But I still loved it. I thought that was so, like, I don't know. There's something about it resonated with me where it was, like, still cool looking. I could tell what they were doing and why, but I still liked it. Almost because it was like a cartoon character, But then it was like a horror anthology, and one of the stories was the ending. I'll just give it away. A woman gets like melted, and she's still sort of somehow alive, and she's walking toward the camera or the other character in the movie, and she's trying to talk to him, and it's super creepy. And we took like a potty and snack break while watching this movie, and I went into the kitchen to get some chips or something. And I freaked myself out. I was like, what if the melting woman was in here right now? And I could see her in my mind's eye, It was very imaginative. I think my imagination muscle was a lot better as a kid. I could really like photographically picture anything I wanted to for a moment. And I saw it. I saw her in the kitchen, like coming towards me, like in the darkness. And then I turned on the light and she wasn't there. And I was like, Jesus, that like really freaked me out. I was fully on board with the terror of it all. And thinking back on it, as a memory, it was like that was everything that you get out of watching horror movies. You get that laugh of like, oh, come on, that looked fake or whatever. Or, oh, geez, that would be an awful way to die, getting impaled on that thing. You get to like laugh about it. And then you get to lay there in the dark thinking about the Blair Witch or whatever, And you get to freak yourself out a little bit afterwards, or freak out your date or whatever. All right, I think this guy's done. What do you think? Anyway, that movie was called Monster Club. And it was a British horror movie. And I somehow just a couple years ago, when I was doing the Cheap Chills podcast, I was on Amazon looking for movies to talk about, and I put it on, and I was like, oh my god, this is the movie. And this version wasn't hosted by Elvira, it was just a movie on its own, but it's so weird and low budget, and I'm bad with actors' names, but it was Vincent Price and this other like legend of British horror who was so ancient in this movie that he was still kind of like a cameo almost. but he was so ancient that like his hands were just gnarled claws, and it had nothing to do with the plot of the movie. They didn't mention his hands. They didn't address it, which I think is a little odd. I would at least write something in, you know, because you're going to notice it. Anyway, look up Monster Club. All right, here's the mystery guy. Let's see here. All right. So now that I've blathered on for a long time, and I really only have like about like half an hour. I'll just try to do something relatively quickly of Elvira, and hope that it's not horrible. Anyway, thank you, Elvira, for hostessing that Monster Club and changing my life. So when I feel like I'm mixing up my memories, but when I was a teenager, I had some Elvira memorabilia, and no, I'm thinking I'm mixing up my memories. But let's see here. What am I trying to talk about? I'm going to do the underdrawing move again here, so I get her form right. I'm actually going to keep it kind of small. I think it's easier to see what I'm doing that way. Exploration of Elvira's form. Anyway, I went to a convention. I think, Michael, you were at it if you're still watching. It was WonderCon in San Francisco, and I was exhibiting and selling my stuff. And Cassandra Peterson was like 2 aisles over doing her thing with the signing booth. Oh, this goes with my ongoing theme of meeting your heroes. I went over there and said hi and got my signed picture, of course. And she gave me this awesome photo of her doing the moon bathing. Have you seen that one? I was thinking about drawing that one. Maybe I'll do it next time I get the urge to draw Elvira, but I've got another alternate look for this one. Anyway, she's got the black like one piece on, and like some kind of moon UV ray juice or whatever that she's, her tanning lotion. It's a great photo. Anyway, I was like, hey, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was on your TV show. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, but there was, I think, just one season of this show, like Who Wants to Be the Next Elvira? And Amanda was on it. And it's kind of a sore subject for her because she was the first person voted off, unfortunately. So she didn't get much of a a shot there to do her thing, but she looked very, very different then. It was way before I ever met her, but it was kind of at the beginning of her modeling career. Actually, I think the story goes that she was kind of goofing around with photos and not really working with professional photographers much. I'm not sure. Didn't have much of a portfolio at that point, but really had like a distinct look, of course. And the producers of this show found her on MySpace. Remember MySpace? Of course you do. Man, you know what? MySpace had its own like strengths that we really haven't been able to get back to in other social media, but I'll get to that another time. I don't like this arm. So anyway, as the story goes, she was contacted by a producer for this show, and they're like, "Hey, you got a great look or whatever. We're gonna start production on this show. Technically, it's gonna be, a lot of people auditioning for it, but we'll kind of, if you want to do it, we'll bring you in as like a definite yes, and you'll go through like the audition process, but you're kind of on the down low, a definite yes kind of person. I guess so that they, know they have some people to work with, and it's not going to be a complete shot in the dark on these auditions. I wonder if they do similar stuff with American Idol. Anyway, the whole concept of this show, I love Elvira. I watched it when this show was on. I remember watching it long before ever meeting Amanda. But the whole concept was a little off because it was under the premise that it was an assumption that Elvira was gonna like retire and not do that anymore, and that they would need a new, sexy horror host, funny person to like take over that sort of role in the world. And that's kind of ridiculous because she was not planning on going anywhere. She's gonna do it till the day she's undead, right? So that was kind of silly. Where American Idol or Project Runway would sort of have the promise of like you doing something once it's all over. If you're the winner, what are you gonna do? I don't know what the winner of this show did with her win in her life, but anyway. So she was part of the first episode and had a few lines on the show, and then got axed. That might even be what they called it. I don't remember. You know what I'm going to do on this one? I'm going to take the whole thing, copy the layer, or cut the layer. I'm going to turn it again. Okay, I'll probably crop it later anyway, but it's a, portrait style here. Paste. Now she's got some room for some hair. Is this going on too long? Are we okay? Is anybody there? Okay, cool. So, where was I with this story? Amanda got let go from the show, and she's not happy, of course. If you bring, I used to bring it up a lot when we, not a lot, but when we first started going out, I thought that was pretty cool, and I'd bring it up, and I could tell that she, didn't think it should have gone that way, and would have liked more of a break to do stuff, to get out there with what she does, and the whole premise of the show and what would happen as the new horror host, she had problems with that too, I think. Anyway, for me, I think that she was too young and not there with her personality or even her look to be right, but she definitely did come into her own in a way where I think she would make a great horror hostess. Obviously with the look, but also just by being funny, and not being funny as an impression of Elvira, like you're doing some kind of impersonation, but not just being sexy, you know what I mean? Because she's not just, I'm sexy model and I'm vacuous, she comes from an improv background from the Groundlings, and she, it has a great character, and she has a good sense of what's funny. And so I think Amanda would do a great job of just being her natural funny self, her way as a horror hostess. I think that would be pretty cool. Especially because, and this was the premise of our Cheap Chills Show podcast, she doesn't really like horror movies, and maybe that's a problem. I don't know, but I think that was funny that it really wasn't her bag watching horror movies. Nothing specific about them, except I think she has her own sort of demons, no pun intended, with as far as anxiety and being triggered by things that she would see. I've seen her I think she's very empathetic, so I've seen her see what happens to when we watched Conan, not a horror movie, but some horrific things happen to Conan, right, in the first half hour of the movie. And when we watched it, she went white, which also could be part of the look as a hostess, but she literally was horrified to see what was happening to this young Conan character, Conan. And it took her seeing that for me to be like, oh yeah, I guess that really is a horrific thing to be have your parents killed, and then you're enslaved for 17 years, and then you're a slave that has to be a gladiator. And then, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, that's just your training. That's what you need to have happen to be a cool, awesome, strong barbarian, That's just what needs to happen. Just same as Batman. But anyway, it's funny to show her movies that aren't her bag, and it means that she's never seen any of them, never heard of most of them. So to be able to show her the stuff, or I even showed her Star Wars. She was against watching Star Wars. Again, not a horror movie, but you know what I mean. She liked watching Grease 2 and that kind of thing. Crybaby, Pretty Woman, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so she didn't make it all the way through, and so then at the end of the episode, they would zap you with an electric chair kind of a situation, and you'd, through the magic of television, get vaporized and turned into smoke, and you have to pretend to die horribly on camera in order for that to happen in the show. And she was saying that was also rough, you're actually going through the pain of learning that you were just eliminated, and that's real, and now you have to act and be silly, and that was hard, and kind of make a big joke of how much that hurt. Anyway, at the WonderCon, I approached Cassandra Peterson And um, I think she was all Elvira'd out. I don't even really remember. Sometimes she'll do it like just in her redhead look, and sometimes she'll be gothed out. That doesn't matter to the story. The point is, I brought up like, here's my problem with meeting heroes. I always try to like take it further into conversation and milk the moment maybe more than is necessary beyond just getting the signed picture and leaving. I always gotta like say something. And I was like, my girlfriend was on your show. She was one of the people, one of the Elviras. And she's like, oh, how cool, which one? And she, you know, I don't think she remembered specifically, but she's like, bring her over, you know. So I came back with my picture and like said, you know, Elvira wants to talk to you and chat about the show, and she wasn't up for that, so then I felt silly. Whatever. I'm not picturing what her hair usually looks like. In this picture, she seems to kind of have like a different do a little bit. It's a little more boudoir casual, but I think that's cool. So I'm kind of doing a mix of this photo and what her hair typically looks like. And then again, I think I'm going to do my little move where I study for a moment. And then try not to look. I think I'm gonna even minimize for a moment. I don't know. I just think that if you let things kind of stew, at least in my brain for a minute, it starts to turn into more how you remember a person. And then it looks more like that person, hopefully, as I set up expectations. Then it looks more like the person than the photo somehow, which is pretty weird. That's a whole other subject, you know, like likenesses and the idea of like tracing photos. You know, real talk, with the coloring book, I made use of photos more heavily than I usually do, but it was really to kind of get the proportions and the layout of where everybody is, figured out earlier rather than later, so that I wasn't spending too long on something that just wasn't going to work, like composition-wise, you know. And because I know, I don't have to prove to myself anymore that I know, you know, what a hand is shaped like, or collarbones, or whatever it is, right? I don't need to prove. I felt like I've always had to like prove that to people. I can, you know, I can draw anatomy. Watch, I'm Michelangelo, you know. Why? If that's not the point of your illustration, to like show that off, if that's not your strong point, then don't worry about it, you know. I feel like the same way with color. I know people who geek out on color, and they love like going to the rose garden first thing in the morning and seeing how the light affects the roses at 5 o'clock in the morning in summer versus, you know what I mean. They love that, and that is their thing. It's not my thing. I really don't care about color. I want it to look good, but I don't. That's not the point of what I'm doing. That's not why I get jobs, from my expertise about color, right? And so the same thing really with anatomy. I think that my strong points are likenesses and like making something that's funny, whatever. The concept of it. It's not about how awesome I am at getting anatomy just right. Anyway, the point is, I made use of photos in order to make sure that I wasn't doing anything weird. I tend to make necks too long. So rather than falling into messing things like that up, I just kind of, I mean, that could be another tutorial another time, but I would just use that as like its own underdrawing, keep the photo under there and get the anatomy basically worked out. And then I would make a point still to do this thing with the face where I look and then I study and then I turn it off so that I have like a fresh face. Because I think whatever you do with photos, if you trace a photo of a face, it always looks weird. Why? It's so weird. A photo, you recognize the person. Oh, I know who that celebrity is or whatever. But then when you trace it, it just doesn't look like that person anymore. Even if you're like a pro and you know what you're doing, it helps to know like how to make nice lines and where to trace and where not to trace. But either way, you have to have that like exaggeration that comes from your mind more than the literal photo. All right, I'm going to bring a photo up, by the way, again, because I don't remember from here what to do. Another thing that I tend to do is sort of flatten out and widen the face in weird ways. And I think that that's what happened here, because her cheekbone is all the way over here and that looks super weird, but that's easy enough to fix. It's interesting with Elvira's makeup, she will super overdraw the effect of her basically eyelashes to where there's this big triangle of white skin between her eyeball and the makeup. So you can't be confused when drawing people's makeup as to what the actual anatomy is. You gotta understand what's actually going on under there and what's makeup. You know who's a queen of that, by the way? Amanda. She especially like early on when we were going out, would blow my mind when we're watching a movie or TV, and she would point out like makeup like on a man or an actor that I didn't see, and then like your brain does a little flip and you see it all of a sudden. You're like, oh, I see the orange and where it ends, and I see the little highlights and things that were just painted on. It's just a painting on your face. So it's great if you can really, I mean, she was a makeup artist for 12 years, which is why she can see that so quickly. But to understand the difference between a painting that's on your face versus your actual face, and how those things kind of collide with makeup and with illustrating makeup, that could be its own tutorial. I gotta write these things down. Mental note. Sorry, I'm gonna write that down because I had a couple good ideas here for future themes that I'm already gonna forget. What's makeup and what is your actual face? One place where beginners get really tripped up, or even people who've been drawing for years and just didn't really get it trained out of them, is this area down here around the jaw, the jawline. Here, I'll draw it the wrong way first. Everybody, beginners, they'll do this thing where it's like this big old severe line, and then there'll just be this like stick of a neck coming out from like a skull. And what actually happens with people's, no matter how slim they are, they've got meat down here, right? And so there's this jawline of your skull bones, and then there's this throat and flesh down here. And some, if you're overweight or whatever, you're gonna have more. If you are underweight, you're going to have less, but there's always something down here. So don't just draw a pencil coming out of a skull, please. What I like to do is kind of leave it open a little bit. But what happened with her here is I like her chin. That's kind of how her chin goes, but it's a little lumpy. And then you don't want to leave it like that because it looks like she's got an old jowl. That's not what she looks like. Oh, good. I drew on the underdrawing again. I love when I... Alright, whatever. I can fix that. Alright, so I'm going to leave it open like that for now, and then I think I'm going to take advantage of lighting a little bit to split the difference in that gap there later on. And hopefully it'll come out in a way where she doesn't look like she's got some kind of weird jowls. The other thing to do when you're drawing likenesses is really kind of drink in what makes that person look like that person, as far as the relationships of where their features are. You know, are the eyes big? Are they small? Are they far apart? Are they close together? Are they high on the person's head? Are they low on the person's head, giving them a bigger forehead? And again, that's why I love looking at yearbooks, because you just instantly see it when it's a bunch of tiny images. And I do think that if you look at a person and then put it away, put the photo away, your brain starts to exaggerate those relationships of features in order for you to kind of file them away in your brain. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to look at her mouth. I think her nose is acceptable. And then put it away again. But basically what happens with caricature, from what I understand, is your brain tries to like file away everybody's face. I was trying to exaggerate her sort of mean mug, but I think because she's looking down so much, I don't need to go quite that severe. Her serious face. Anyway, your brain like files away every face that you've encountered, and some people are better at recalling it than others. But I think what happens is it exaggerates all these relationships. And maybe that's why tracing a photo doesn't really work, because your brain doesn't trace a photo. It exaggerates all the relationships of the person's visage. Okay, one thing that is one of the hardest things about drawing faces is getting eye contact if you're trying to get eye contact. And the best advice I've ever heard on that is to just approach it one eye at a time and see if you get that feeling. I think duct tape told me about it, the name for it last time. Somebody did. There's like a name for the feeling you get for when you know somebody's looking at you. If you get that feeling, you know that you've put the iris in the right place, pupil, whatever. If you don't feel like somebody's looking at you, then you got it off a little bit. So I just kind of keep experimenting with it until it feels like it's looking at me. I think that's acceptable. And again, working digitally, I'm not opposed to cheating and picking up an eyeball or pupil or whatever and moving it. Why not? What is the point of working digitally if you can't do stuff like that? The other place beginners go wrong is with eyes. I feel like young people, especially, they're into like anime, and it's all about like you know, the formula of these stylized eyes where anatomy is almost completely thrown out the window. And I get, like, if somebody knows what they're doing and understands anatomy, you can really push things that way with the highlights and the parts of the eye and exaggerating everything in a way that you would never actually see in real life. The problem is if you don't understand anatomy and lighting and stuff like that, and you just copy the way you've seen other people do something like eyes, it's not going to work. It's going to look flat and weird. So don't just copy other people's drawings and think, oh, now I know how to draw eyes, right? The other problem that happens a lot with drawing eyes, especially, and everything in anatomy really, is you think you know how they're built and how they work, you know, based on, I don't know, I guess we figure out things in life about everything, like how you believe that they work, what you need to know about them, and then you just kind of file that away and never think about it again, even when you're trying to draw, and then it becomes a problem. So what happens is people think about an eye as being like an upper eyelid, and then there's going to be this iris, and then there's going to be a pupil, which is always tiny for some reason when you're a beginner, and then maybe there should be a highlight, and then they like outline the highlight, you know, like that. Oh, and you know what else eyes have? Lines. They got a bunch of lines going through them, and my computer's auto-saving again here. Right? So they're like, eyes have a bunch of lines going through them like this, and then they got eyelashes. And I mean, first of all, that looks weird either way, but if you're drawing a close-up of an eye for some reason, fine, notice those things. But what if you're like drawing somebody who's 4 feet away and you're like still in there drawing all these like lines in people's irises and stuff, and not looking at how things look and feel from afar? So you see, you zoom out on her, her eye pretty much still holds up and looks detailed. This one, there's just way too much detail pressed into there, and it's all getting kind of hazy and weird as you zoom out. So I like the amount of detail in her eyes right in my face there, and I'm going to delete this one over here. Okay, so I'm going to need to wrap this up. I don't want to go on forever and ever with this. But usually I end up taking a while to make sure the face is acceptable, and then the rest of the body doesn't take as long. So hopefully this won't take forever from here. All right, here's an interesting thing when you're drawing people that happens a lot for pros and otherwise, and that is the face looks good. I like that face, but I don't think it looks like her for some reason. So I'm going to bring up her photo again and see if there's anything I can fix that would help the likeness a little bit. I mean, honestly, usually the hair and like the outfit, people will be like, oh, I get it, you know. I think there's a lot of forgiveness with when you're drawing a person's caricature or whatever, but I like to have it still kind of click to where even if you were just without hair, just seeing that face, could you tell who that's supposed to be? And honestly, I'm not seeing it. So one problem is probably structural. So I will just grab individual features and see if I can move them around and see if it helps. And her nose was kind of pushing in too much. And Cassandra's pushes out more. And what's interesting about her nose, she's just got a very distinct nose. And I think she uses makeup to kind of, what's the word, de-emphasize it. But I think it's sort of exotic and the kind of nose that people who are, I don't know, people might be tempted to get a nose job even if they had this kind of nose, but I like a distinct nose. Either way, I think to get her likeness and to make it look like Elvira, I'm going to need to make it sort of distinct and sort of de-emphasized because that's what she does with her makeup. That's better. It's better. You know what? It's not awful like that. Like I said, there's just like these sort of norms that happen with art in any period where everybody sort of doesn't even realize that they're copying each other. And I try to avoid those things, especially the norms that have become mainstay because of anime look. It's just sort of become the de facto cartooning, and younger people I think don't even realize that all their cartooning ideas have come from anime now. Manga, whatever you want to call it. I know that one is comics and one is cartoons, but it's just a look that I've never really liked. You know, I like some movies on occasion, but the whole manga look has never been attractive for me. Just kind of sculpting the line work a little bit to see if I can get the likeness a little better. It's hard with like beautiful women. That's the hardest thing for me to draw because you don't want to one wrong move and it's just going to look not right. But I don't want it to look like a pinup thing either, even though spoiler alert, she's going to be in an outfit, a teddy, I believe they're called. I think that's better. I think that's not bad. Here's another great example of not, getting tempted to go too far with the detail that you see in a photo and not trying to push that into the illustration. In the photo, you can almost see that her mouth is a little open and her teeth are showing. And the last thing you want to do is start drawing, individual teeth. Right? That's going to look horrible. Now I got to see it for fun anyway. It's kind of funny. It's not the look that I was looking for, but I don't hate it. It's kind of funny. Maybe I'll... What happens is if you draw each individual tooth, it looks like they've never seen a dentist and they've got like a bunch of no dentist grout in their teeth between them. So yeah, if you are drawing horror comics and you want to do a crypt keeper, by all means outline every tooth. But just because it's like eyes, just because you know the anatomy is a certain way, don't start putting it in the drawing or it's gonna not look the way you were hoping it would. It's kind of funny. I don't know. And then her lip is open and kind of coming out a little bit, so I'm going to put a little shadow down there. There's something about this song where every time it comes on, I'm like, I need a longer playlist. I think she's got a little dimple almost right here, little BB dimple. Yeah. All right, I think that is gonna work, and then I'm gonna maybe fix this line up a little bit. Yeah, I think that's okay for the face. Okay, like I mentioned, I accidentally drew her on the layer that had the underdrawing on it. So what I'm gonna do is try to fix it. And this is gonna implement those layer types that I was showing earlier. So what I'm gonna do is go select color gamut, and 15 is probably good. Yeah, we could even go a little higher. Try again. I think that's acceptable. I mean, it's probably fine to leave the underdrawing there, but I would like to color this a little bit, and that's going to get in the way to have those pencil mark there. So I would like to remove myself from that. All right, so I've got a decent selection of the black and not the underdrawing. So I'm going to go cut, paste, and leave that underdrawing up because I still need it for the body. Is this going on too long? Is anybody there? Okay, so now what has happened is it's freezing again. I've taken the black off of that layer with the underdrawing. I can turn off the underdrawing, and it looks pretty good. Now I could turn this into a monochrome layer and really make it crisp. I think I will, so I can color it easier. I'm even going to do this move that I figured out is sort of a hack in Clip Studio, where I make a new color layer, put it under that monochrome layer, and then I merge it down. And now, even though it's a color layer, it's just black pixels with the stair step effect, which is going to help me color it. And I do that because if you don't, Clip Studio holds on to the information of all those fuzzy lines anyway, and then when you try to color it, it's still going to be fuzzy. So this kind of sets it in stone, I call it. All right, I think that likeness is acceptable. I want it to be kind of odd looking, and it is. The other thing that I'm noticing is that I always kind of make the forehead too big and the hair too high, so I'm going to make more hair. Oh, it's still kind of Pat Benatar spiky and weird in spots. Like, I kind of made it looser than that, but oh well. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm gonna make it a little spikier in spots. Something more like that, I guess, is fine. Okay, now I'm going to make her body and her outfit, and then we'll be done. Oh, man. Oh! I turned this underdrawing layer into a monochrome, and that's why it looks weird. But it's kind of cool to see. You zoom in on these pencil lines, and it's kind of interesting texture. And like with the coloring book and stuff, with my print stuff, it's an interesting unifying look that you get. Yeah. All right, so let's see here. I'll turn that back to color. Like I said, it holds on to that information, so you can turn it back to color anytime. So that might help you or might get in the way, depending on what you're doing. All right, I'm gonna go back to this khaki color and a pencil and finish her arms. In this picture, she's like standing in hell or something. There's like this indication of fire in the foreground. If you've ever seen the picture, you know what I'm talking about. But I don't know if I have time for that, so I don't know if that matters really. We can editorialize it our own way. So where I went wrong last time is her arms weren't long enough. So maybe I'll put the little elbow out here. Elbows tend to sort of just hang out in this area here with the so they can dig into your waist at any moment, you know. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. Now, obviously, if you're doing some super cool pose like she's doing, that's not going to be exactly how it goes. And I'm noticing that she's got like her hand here. The thing about like exploring and committing, by the way, is if something's unclear to you. No, what am I trying to say? When things are touching each other in a image, like somebody's sitting on a chair or a ball, or they're hugging a tree, you know, or they're dancing in a cage and they're grabbing onto the cage. It's really important to make sure that the anatomy lines up to the like inanimate objects, or in this case, her anatomy needs to line up to other parts of the anatomy that she's touching, like her waist here. So that's why I'm definitely doing an underdrawing here, because going direct, you might end up with some pretty weird looking arms as you try to get them to line up to land in the proper spots here. And I think, you know, if you end up really with the image that is good enough that you like, I don't believe in cheating anymore. So if you feel like you need to do whatever you need to do in an underdrawing, if you need to implement photos in any way, I'm not talking about copyrights, of course, but if you have the rights to work with a photo. Oh my God, I started the story of my photos that I was working with, and then I forgot to finish that story, didn't I? But yeah, underdrawing in this setting for me is what's going to help, so that's what I'm doing. Just to kind of get the anatomy laid out. I'm not going to figure out every single line that's involved in this drawing. But as far as the photos that I worked with for the Let's Draw Goths coloring book, thanks for sticking with me, Michael. Oh, I know that if my butt is asleep, you may be as well. As far as the photos that I worked with, I found people that I wanted to draw on Instagram, and then a lot of times either they had commented, like there's these aggregating kind of accounts that I'll follow where they would post the kind of pictures that I like, which are generally actual photos, snapshots from a time when people weren't constantly photographing every moment and posing for them and making duck lips and stuff. I like less self-conscious days when people might have actually been kind of having fun on camera or just living their life, and somebody busted out a camera and grabbed a picture of them. Anyway, so I'll see a picture like that I like, and sometimes the person who was in the picture would be like, hey, that's me. Bam, I got him. I know who they are. So I would reach out and be like, hey, would it be cool if I drew you? And, to be honest, I would go ahead and if you're thinking of doing a project like this with people, with real people who aren't models or photographers who own the rights who can license your stuff for you, which is a whole other subject, I would maybe suggest the same thing, which is the cat on the roof technique. Do you know the cat on the roof technique? Oops, that's not what I wanted. I'm going to move this line here. Nope. I use the cat on the roof technique with them, and that is, there's this old joke of like a brother is taking care of his brother's cat sitting, while they're on vacation, and then why does it keep going on the wrong layer? And then the brother calls and checks in and says, how's things looking? How's the house? House is fine. Great. How's, Tootsie or whatever? Tootsie was my mom's super fat cat. And then the brother goes, Tootsie is dead. I'm sorry. And the brother goes, Jesus, you just drop that on me? You can't soften the blow a little bit? And the brother's like, well, the house sitting brother, we'll call him Jeff. Jeff goes, I don't know. How do you soften that? I don't know what you mean. And Eric, the brother, goes, I could call and you could say, the cat, oh, she's on the roof and we can't get her down. Nothing to worry about. And then the next time I call, right? The next time I call, you could say, Tootsie, we got her down, but she was a little dehydrated, and she's at the vet. They're hydrating her. It'll be fine. And then the next day I call, then you could say, you know what? Tootsie took a turn for the worse, and I think we should put her down. Or you could say, I did put her down. Whatever, you soften the blow that way. And Jeff goes, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry. Eric goes, all right. How's Mom? Mom's on the roof and we can't get her down. That's the joke, and it's old. Try it out next time we have parties again. But so that's what I would do. I would approach people, and I've just learned the hard way that if I have something in mind that I would like to do to collaborate with somebody, best case scenario, it doesn't matter if I don't know the person. You can't come at them like that with the ultimate best case scenario someday thing. You got to just be like, hey, I like your portfolio or your feed, or I like this picture. And then I would say, what would you think if I drew it? Would that be okay? And if I don't hear back, or, so far nobody said no, but if somebody said no, then now it's a no. But if you get a yes, then you draw it, and then you show it to them. And it helps if you have a portfolio and people know kind of what to expect from you, and they know you're not making fun of them or anything. They can kind of see from your previous work what their drawing might look like, and if it's complimentary or not. And then once you see that they're happy about it, then you can be like, hey, I'm making this book that's like a compilation of all these kind of drawings, the best of them, and you're one of the best of them, if in fact that is the case, right? And then you say, would you like to be in this book? and you ask permission again, and that's really all I did. The people that I couldn't find, you know, most of the photos were old, so if I couldn't figure out who the person was, even like sometimes it's just like their friend commented and they're like, oh, I know that guy. I might have to reach out to a friend first, but some people I just never could figure out who they were. So I Google reverse image searched and found that a couple of the photos were done. I should have figured it out, but they were done by pros. Even though they were like snapshots out on the street, I should have known that like they were in focus and everything. So of course, it was a professional. So then I would reach out to them and see if I could license it, because I don't want any problems to arise from this stuff. I don't want to assume that, oh, nobody will notice, right? The world's not that small. And I would like to set myself up for success, and if a book becomes a success and it becomes popular, why wouldn't these people eventually find out? You know, their friend buys a book and they're like, hey, isn't this a photo you took? So you don't want to be like that. So I contacted pros who had taken photos and licensed some stuff. And luckily they were cool about knowing that we were all just doing indie projects, and I don't work for Rolling Stone or anything, or Vice or whatever, and I don't have that kind of budget, so that worked out fine. That said, there were some people that they didn't even come up in a Google image search, except like on people's Pinterest boards, and there's no information about anybody on those either. So in that case, I rolled the dice, and I figured that these people are kind of lost to time, or don't like want to identify themselves. You know, maybe they went full Christian and were ashamed of that period in their life, or whatever is going on with them in their life. Maybe they're not with us anymore and they're not available to give permission. That happened with somebody as well. And I think that as long as in good faith I'm not making fun of anybody, and I'm not laughing all the way to the bank on any of this stuff, I think it's worth the risk to have the people who couldn't be found or turned out to not be with us anymore. And that's what I did. That's how I got the pictures. You learn as you go, really, right? You'll notice I'm looking at the picture more now. I feel okay about that once you have like the basic stuff laid out. It's just kind of to get a reminder of what's going on with the pose, or the outfit mostly. Deciding on my line quality. No worries if your hands are messy, by the way, Michael. I dig it. That's why I don't fast forward through commercials, because I'm always like cooking or doing the dishes during my favorite podcasts. So I get to take in all the ads, which is the right way to go anyway, isn't it? You don't want to steal the podcasts. Oh, here's another great little tip here on drawing people and when to put in detail and when not to. I think a lot of it, sometimes you gotta just be told by somebody, and this is how I learned. You just don't know what you don't know, and that's why being self-taught is really hard, and a lot of people don't really grow with their skill level if they really truly don't take in anything like as far as criticism or classes or anything. Anyway, you don't know what you don't know, and one of the things is when you add too much detail, you're going to make somebody look gross, like with the teeth. So here's another example. The fold in her arm. Oh, I see in the photo that there's sort of a fold going on with her skin. So here you go. Here's a line. That looks gross. You know, it looks like she's got some kind of flab right there that's being casting some giant shadow. So I would do something else, like maybe skip it entirely, and if I do any coloring, I could maybe make a little hint at that with the coloring so it's more subtle. Or I might just leave like a little triangle of a line there for now. But even then, that looks not great. But this is kind of a quirky one anyway, so whatever. All right, now what are we gonna do next? She's got this like spiked bracelet. It's gonna drop some black in there and maybe exaggerate it even more a little bit. Draw like the level playing field of the leather or level. We can all talk that way now, can't we? No, that's weird too. Okay, I'm gonna keep this one pretty simple. You're right. So now that I'm not doing underdrawings anymore, I'm going to not need this anymore. What if I just made some big white spikes? Just kind of more like a symbol than the reality of the photo. I like that. I like doing that. And then it's going to need like maybe something like that. Keep it loosey-goosey. Okay, check it out. You're making spikes and stuff. A lot of beginners, what you'll do is you just have like this tense hand, and then you'll be like scritch, 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 erase, scritch, 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 scritch. I did it! You know, I made a spike. The secret to so much of drawing is, and painting, of course, is the speed. What your speed is when you make a stroke is going to affect the thing that you're drawing. It's going to affect the stroke. So if I was drawing a mountain in the distance that was full of trees, then maybe that's a good way to go. But if you're trying to do a spike, you got to just kind of do a fast thing. And digitally, you can try a couple times and see which one works best, you know, try to fix it from there maybe. But that's why I'll turn the stabilization down in this program for this kind of stuff, where I'm working fast. Keep the stabilization down, just try a couple times. Or you could turn it all the way up and see what happens there. But then you're just going to be drawing really slow. I guess that's more maybe of a precise look a little bit, but it just takes forever to draw that way. So I've gotten out of the habit of worrying about stabilization too much. I'm trying to keep looser than that. You know what? I think this is going to need a part 2, because I've lost all the feeling in my ass. So I think I'm gonna, I don't know. I mean, I could keep trying to add a little bit of line to this, or I could just start off where I left off and talk about digital inking more next time and coloring a little bit. I'm gonna just add enough color to keep it simple, but like I said, I'm not a renderer. I don't want to get involved in that. And I think that that's a better skill when you're trying to be an illustrator anyway, is to try to just get the point across of what you're doing rather than spending a million years rendering out and blending everything. I think that's kind of a beginner move to worry about blending stuff out with just the right brushes and everything. And that's a super weird looking shoulder, so I'm not going to keep that. And I think it's time to call it a day, and we'll just get back into it next time. All right, so I'm going to make sure to save this. Probably should call it something better than Goths and put it somewhere that makes sense. And that's it. Thanks for joining me, Michael, and Duct Tape if you're still around, or anybody else that's checking this out on the sly or afterwards. Thanks for drawing Goths with me. Let me know if you have any feedback, if you'd like me to show you how to do something very specific or do a draw-by-draw, play-by-play of something. I can try that. I don't know if that would work. But if you have any suggestions, go ahead and tell me in the comments. All right. But for now, keep drawing spooky. I don't think I've come up with a good sign off yet, and that one doesn't even make any sense. So I'm going to go have a sandwich and massage my buttocks. All right. See you guys.